Hello and welcome to a special Primary Vote 2011 edition of News 12's Newsmakers. Everyone, I'm Brian Coneybear. Today, the race to replace Phil Amicone as Yonkers mayor. There are 6 candidates hoping to take over at Yonkers City Hall now that Mayor Amicone is being term limited out at the end of this year. Over the next hour, we're going to hear from the candidates in the Democratic primary race on the major issues facing Westchester's largest city. There are 3 men on the ballot in the September 13th Democratic Party primary, and we are happy to have them all with us right now. We begin in alphabetical order with Robert Flower. Mr. Flower is a financial consultant and real estate investor from Yonkers. He is also a longtime community activist who actually helped get the city's term limits laws passed. We also welcome Chuck Lesnick. Mr. Lesnick is currently serving his 2nd term as Yonkers City Council president. He is also an attorney in private practice. And we welcome Mike Spano. Mr. Spano is an assemblyman representing the city of Yonkers up in Albany. He has the support of the Yonkers Democratic Party committee in this race. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here. I want to tell you this is less a formal debate and more an open discussion of the issues. We will give each candidate 2 minutes to state their case to Yonkers viewers and voters. We randomly drew numbers before we began. Mr. Lesnick, you will start. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement, sir.
Thank you, Brian, and thank News 12 for what you're doing. Frankly, I wish there were more debates, but what you do to educate the community is important because the News 12 voters are the people who participate most in primaries because they know the most about local news. They are the most educated voters. And education is the primary reason why I'm running. Education, good paying jobs, and fiscal responsibility. Those are the 3 things that I hope to stress during this debate today. But first I'll start with how I got here. You know, Beth and I settled in Yonkers right when we got married 26 years ago. Like many families, we picked Yonkers because of its proximity to New York City, its great topography, the Hudson River. We love the people of Yonkers. We love the historic architecture of Yonkers. We love the spirit of Yonkers. Yonkers has the potential of being a truly first-class city in this country. It also has the potential of going bankrupt in the next 12 months. So the next 12 months, the next 4 years are a very important time in the city, and you need a strong leader who will stress fiscal responsibility, good paying jobs, and education, and I hope we talk about that today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Lesnick. All right, Mr. Flower, you go second. You have 2 minutes as well, sir.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank Channel 12 for this opportunity. Okay, you know, I was born and raised in the city, as was my dad before me, and my 3 children after me, and my 2 grandchildren. This was a great city. We used to have a lot of fun here, a lot of real Damon Runyon characters. That's all gone now. The city is in dire straits. The reason? Politics. But not just politics as usual. It's the career politician, it's the political machine, and it's the old boy network. It's brought the city to its knees. What I intend to bring here is a background of 45 years of business experience, executive leadership. In fact, my doctorate is in organizational and system sciences, so I have a theoretical as well as a practical background. I mean, tell me, folks, are you satisfied with what's going on? I mean, when was the last time you can remember that we didn't have a budget issue, or there wasn't a dilemma with the schools, or there wasn't some sort of investigation going on? The city has been torn apart. We need strong executive management skills, which is what I bring to the office. And what I hope to do is have very specific programs, which you can find on my website. We're going to talk about them here today, I hope, but my website is bobflowerformayor.com, and you will see some programs for fixing the schools, for crime, for the budget, and for bringing in new resources into the city. I hope that September 13th, all you folks out there remember Bob Flower, because I promise you this, when I take that seat as mayor, you're going to know that you have somebody that, number 1, knows what to do, number 2, knows how to do it, and number 3, has the political courage to carry it out. Thanks, and I'll see you September 13th.
All right, thank you, Mr. Flower. Mike Spano, you get the final opening statement. You have 2 minutes as well.
Great, thank you, Brian, and thank you to News 12 and the viewers. What I'd like to do before I even begin my opening statement is, I guess when you're middle-aged, the biggest worry you have is when one of your elderly parents gets hurt. My mom fell down a flight of steps this morning. I just came from the hospital, and she is going to be ready to go undergo surgery. Thank God she has 15 other children that are there with her. And I just want to let my mother know, because I know at some point, Mom, you'll be watching this, that I love you, and we know you're going to be fine, and keep the spirits up. My grandfather came here to Yonkers over 100 years ago, and came here with his family and with a vision, and he wanted to start an ice and cold business, and they did that. And they had a set of values, and values that they were going to give to their children to take on from generation to generation. The Spano family doesn't deliver ice and cold anymore, but my wife and I continue to raise our children here, and we've instilled those values in our children. That's why this race for mayor is so important. Yonkers is at a crossroads. We can continue to elect the people who have been running for Yonkers for quite some time and worry about whether or not we're going to have a crisis next year, worry about whether or not our children are going to have the educational needs that they need, or whether or not our trash is going to get picked up. Or we can have a new approach. And that's what this debate is about today, and I'm looking forward to having this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Spano. All right, all three of you have mentioned the budget, and every year the city of Yonkers seems to careen from budget crisis to budget crisis. If you're elected mayor, Mr. Lesnick, let's start with you. How do you change that? How do you end this cycle of budget crisis after budget crisis?
Well, first we have to look to Albany, and that's what we do from the time the governor proposes his budget in January, and even before that, because it's well known that Yonkers doesn't get its fair share, and we work with our legislators to try to make that argument every year. Sometimes it works better than others. This year it didn't work as well as it could have worked, and one of my opponents, Mr. Spano, voted for the governor's budget, which shortchanged Yonkers, so it put us in a crisis situation right away. Secondly, we have to look inward. We have to get our fiscal house in order. We can't be driving around in these big SUV gas-guzzling cars that the taxpayers pay. We can't be wasting money with commissioners and deputy commissioners that are performing duplicate jobs, and we can consolidate better in government, and we have to really look at the outcomes. We get $18,000, $19,000 per child. Are we educating them to the best of our ability? Can we use new technology, new techniques? Can we better train our people so that we have better outcomes at the end of the day? That's what I would look at.
Mr. Spano, you are up in Albany. Is that a fair statement that it's Albany's fault that Yonkers has these problems every year?
Frankly, and I've always said that I don't think that the state capital gives enough towards education overall in New York State. And that's an argument that can be made not just here in Yonkers, but in many places in New York State. But where I have been critical of the local administration has been the fact that each and every year, it's more like when you watch The Wizard of Oz. When you ask the scarecrow, which way do you go? And in one hand goes this way, the other hand goes this way, and eventually they're doing this. But they never seem to point inward. They never seem to say, hey, we messed up. We can always make the case for more money for Yonkers. We can. But that's not the reason that we're in a fiscal crisis. We're in a fiscal crisis today because we are spending dollars we don't have. And that's the bottom line. And so as mayor, what I will do very clearly, number one, is go top to bottom on this budget and look to see where we can make cuts and where we can streamline and spend our tax dollars better. We want to make sure that we look at the overtime budget and look at how that's being spent, because clearly there's an issue with management here, and that's why the overtime budgets have ballooned for so many years. The cars, that's a symptom. We know that's a symptom to a bigger problem. 200 cars is what the Yonkers has. Buffalo, it's a city much larger than Yonkers, has 100 cars. There's a problem when individuals are taking cars outside of Yonkers, outside the county, and driving places up county with wear and tear in our vehicles, the gas of our vehicles, and the insurance. That's the type of leadership that has been lacking here in Yonkers, and that's the type of leadership that I expect to put forth as mayor.
Mr. Flower, what would you do if you took this office to kind of stop these constant budget crises?
I've been listening to this story about getting funds from Albany for over 16 years, and it doesn't work. What we need to do is to put organizational systems in place that are going to oversee the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month expenditures that's going on. You know, for instance, with that $300,000 a year police officer, somebody either didn't have a system in place or they fell asleep at the switch. Something like that should never have happened, should never have gotten to the degree it is. But the answer that I have is, aside from saving money, is to bring new revenue sources into the city. One of the ways I'm going to do that is I have this program called the Municipal Insurance Investment Program. And what this program does, just quickly and basically, and I have this on my website, by the way, is it's going to create pools of workers in the city we will then place insurance policies, life insurance policies on, and we're going to take that package, bring it down to Wall Street, securitize it, and that will generate, at least initially, somewhere between $20 to $30 million a year. Eventually, that type of program, and this is by insurance standards and Wall Street standards, can possibly bring in us as much as $80 million a year. These are the type of programs that I want to bring into Yonkers, not just reach out for Albany or say it's the Afghan war that we're being shortchanged and everything else. Let's, as a businessman, you make do with what you have. And that's an executive leadership position. All of the other candidates, whether they be Republican or Democrat, are legislators. I'm the only one that has strong executive management skills as a 45-year businessman. That's part of the approach I would take for balancing the budget.
Brian, if I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Flower mentioned the $300,000 cap. The City Council responded by passing a $20,000 per person overtime cap. Now, part of the problem is that Mike Spano, when he was in the Assembly, voted so that instead of your best 3 years, it's your best 1 year that determines your pension in New York State, in Yonkers. And that's why they're running up the bill. So I want to ask him, how does he take responsibility for that change that has cost Yonkers millions of dollars since he voted for it a dozen years ago? Would he have supported the overtime cap?
Oddly, I was going to ask the same question, not necessarily directly to
I didn't know
Mr.
he was
Spano.
anchoring today.
I know, he's doing my job. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Spano. I trust you would want to respond to that.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? If you remember, the City Council had actually done a home rule message along with the mayor and actually put in place and getting authorization through the state on the final average salary, but that's not the issue.
A previous City Council headed by Mr. Martinelli.
Exactly, but that's not the issue. The issue here is the management of these dollars. When you see one particular individual make $300,000, I didn't see anyone in the council scream, you know, let's offer the commissioner's head, because that's what should have happened. What should have happened was a strong leader would have stood up and would have said, where's our overtime policy? And why is it that there are individuals that are making in excess of $300,000 a year when you could hire probably another 2 or 3 officers? The amount of manpower that we have in the Yonkers Police Department is pre-9/11 levels, and that's a problem. And part of the problem is the fact that there isn't enough oversight or management of that budget that allows for these overtime costs to be out of control. And whether or not you want to get into this whole convoluted argument as to how management is distributed, because we all know that it's protected by the Constitution, you need to look at the management of the city, and that's what I'm going to focus my efforts on.
What I wanted to ask all three of you is, would you support a cap on overtime? Because the City Council did approve a $20,000 cap for all city employees on overtime unless specific exceptions were made, and the mayor vetoed it. Would you support a cap on overtime for Yonkers City employees, Mr. Spano?
I'm not going to support a cap. What I'm going to support is a rational overtime policy, because let's face it, if there is something exceptional happens, you need to make sure that you have the police personnel that are there and available. You don't start off by negotiating with labor as if they're enemies. And if you don't mind me just going off on that a little bit, what we've seen in the past few years has been the demonization of the local worker, the person who educates our children, the person who polices our neighborhoods. That's what we've seen, is a demonization of those workers. We treat them like enemies, and then we wonder why they act like as enemies, and we wonder why our trash doesn't get picked up, or we wonder about some of the other things that are happening. My approach, a new approach, treat them like partners. They're 80% of our budget. It's time we bring them in, like we did in Albany this year. We brought labor in, and we made $500 million in savings, and that's what I expect to do in Yonkers.
Mr. Flower, would you support a cap on overtime, a hard cap like that, $20,000? Or do you have another idea?
Well, I do have another idea, and let me just say that I would be fair with the unions, but the city comes first. The citizens come first. I think that's the primary objective here. See, when you're a career politician, you can't think like that. You have to think about what's going to happen to you first, and then the people second. And that's what's been going on with the old boy network, with the political machine, and with the career politicians. I'm not a career politician. I'm a businessman with some innovative ideas. And let me tell you, when I sit down with the police union or any of the unions, what I intend to do is use some very innovative financial processes to help them with their salary issues and with their pension issues. As a matter of fact, they're going to love this so much that they're going to call Mike up and ask him for a refund on the funds that they've given him for his campaign. So what I want to do is I want to use my financial skills to create programs that are going to help all of the employees. And the Municipal Insurance Investment Plan is one of those programs that can generate more funds for our city employees, among other things.
Let me clarify that it isn't a hard cap that we passed. Actually, John Mertz on the Republicans proposed a hard cap. The bill that passed was really a porous cap. It was a notice provision that the commissioner could still ask the mayor for permission to go over in a specific instance or categorical, merely had to notify the council on a quarterly basis. You know, there's a limitation in a strong mayor form of government to what the council can do. What we were trying to do on the council was send a strong message to the commissioner and the mayor, it is a strong mayor form of government, to manage better. Now, I've heard the unions come to the public hearings and say the same thing that Mike just said, which is, oh, it's not us, it's a management issue, that's why we run amok. It's like shooting your parents and asking the court for mercy because you're an orphan. You can't take care of yourself. So we need to set a standard, and the council has always brought on more police officers, more firefighters, young guys, rookies, because it's more cost effective to do that. So, you know, as far as keeping boots on the ground, we're all for that. And I have said in my State of the State response each year that the unions are not the cause of the problem in this country, and they have to come to the table and negotiate. But I question how my opponent is going to negotiate with the unions when he accepted campaign contributions far in excess of the primary amount. The primary amount is $2,447. Now, he took $7,200 and change from two of the biggest municipal unions in the city. Now, while it's technically only a violation of the law if he spends that money, which is kind of a loophole that Albany created, you can collect it but not spend it, it still gets to the question of how are you going to be an honest broker with these unions if you're beholden to them.
Mr. Spano, respond to that quickly.
Chuck's a lawyer. He knows it's legal. I think he just tried to allude that it wasn't, but clearly, if you listen to his words, it was legal. And let's talk about what's important here. What's important is that we have a leadership void in the city of Yonkers. Who's more invested in the future of our city than the men and women who work in our city? The people who educate our children, police our streets, clean our parks. They're invested in the future of our city. They live here, they work here, they're raising families here. I'm not going to apologize because men and women have endorsed my candidacy, but I will tell you this. I will have a seat at the table for labor, because like we did with working with Andrew Cuomo as governor, we brought CSEA to the table. We brought the other labor unions to the table, and we cut $500 million out of the state budget this year using our relationship, a good, solid relationship with labor. And you know what, Chuck? That's the only way we're going to do it. You continue your policy of treating them and demonizing them and making them the enemy, well then, you know what? Then we're going to see more of the same. It's time for a new approach.
Guys, I got to take a quick break, but Mr. Flower, you wanted to make one comment.
Yeah, well, two quick comments. Number one, I take exception to that, Mike. I think the people that are more invested in the city are the citizens and the taxpayers. They're the ones that should come first, not the unions. I'm willing to work with the unions, but they have to understand that under a Flower administration, it's going to be citizens first and then unions second. I'm willing to treat them fairly. The other problem is I really don't demonize the unions that much. It's the career politician that fed them, that made them part of their power force. And that's how we got into this mess.
Unions are a powerful group in the city of Yonkers, no doubt about that. Gentlemen, a very good start. We're going to take a quick break, but there's much more. To ask you point blank, do you support a financial control board from the state being imposed on Yonkers like we had about a decade ago to help make some of these difficult decisions? Mr. Spano, should there be a financial control board?
Absolutely not. I mean, taking the control of the elected representatives away from the city of Yonkers is something that should never be done unless it is done where the council or the mayor has thrown up their hands and said we can't balance our books. And Yonkers, while Yonkers has some very tough years ahead of it, is not bankrupt. There are some very serious fiscal issues that if we don't address, we could be there. But no, control board abdicating our responsibility and saying, hey, we don't make the tough choices, so let's let somebody else do it. That's not going to be what I'm going to do.
Mr. Lesnick?
Absolutely not. We should not give up that control. The council heard people who said we should recently in our budget deliberations, and when it came time to deliberating about the mayor's proposed transitional finance authority, which would have had us borrow money to help the school system, we rejected the notion of a control board. We did look back at the notion of a wage freeze, which is something that Yonkers did have back in the 70s without a control board, and the state could have done that. Mike Spano rejected the notion of a wage freeze. I thought it was better to freeze wages than give people pink slips, and that if we could have saved those 300 teachers' jobs, I would have been in support of a one-year wage freeze. Murtaugh wanted it to be 2 years, but 1 year would have been fine with me. At one point, I think we suggested that it would be for the life of the bonds, which would have been up to 5 years. That was a negotiating point, again, to see what more we could get from Albany, because we thought maybe if we put pressure on them with something they didn't want to do, they would give us the money that we deserved, that we are rightfully entitled to in Yonkers for education.
Mr. Flower, State Financial Control Board, a good thing, a bad thing?
Bad thing. I'm definitely not in favor of it. However, the way these other candidates operate and function, it may not be a bad idea in that case. It certainly wouldn't be a good idea with me as a chief executive officer. Again, 45 years of experience. I've worked with not only individuals, small businesses, but major corporations. My job was turnaround jobs, workouts, problem solving. That's what we need right now. We need a fiscal officer that knows what he's doing and knows how to do it. And more importantly than anything that we're discussing at this point is, again, the political factor. And I keep repeating that because that's what's taking the city down. That's what's taking government down. That's what's restraining them. Think about all of the issues, whether it's on a federal level, state, or a local level. Take the politics out of the issue, and it's solved like that. And that's the problem with this city in particular. So what we have to do is we have to be innovative. We can't just sit back and do the same old things and say, well, we'll cut expenses here or there. No, we're not going to abdicate authority or responsibility, but then again, we're not going to give away the store under my administration.
Mr. Lesnick, you mentioned 300 teachers in the Yonkers Public Schools getting pink slips. The school district has had just an awful summer, and classes are about to open again. But with fewer teachers, guidance counselors, librarians, less sports, less extracurricular activities, why does it seem that the Yonkers Public Schools always get the short end of the financial stick as opposed to City Hall and the city side of the budget?
Well, that will not happen when I'm mayor. The mayor set it up that way. He could have easily said, we're going to distribute the pain between police, fire, DPW, and education. But instead he said, no, we have a $43 million hole in education. Perhaps he thought it would engender more sympathy. Perhaps it was because we had gone through it the previous year with the police and fire. But I will prioritize education so that doesn't happen, because my children had the benefit of Pearls. They had a benefit of Yonkers Middle High. And then when they cut budgets, they didn't go to school in Yonkers anymore. And every child should have the ability to have a first-class education in Yonkers. There are 26,000 students, and those are the people who I'm running for.
Mr. Flower, what do you think? Does education not get a fair shake in Yonkers?
Well, I don't think that's not my issue, Brian. I think the problem is that
how can you run for mayor and education not be your issue? That is the most important issue that any mayor can do.
Let him finish his answer, please.
I didn't say that, Chuck. What I said was that that's not an issue. That part is not an issue to me. I have a very definite program, which once again, bobflowerformayor.com, you can see this, the reform of Yonkers schools. Let me tell you something. They're talking about almost $20,000 a year per student per year for education. What I want to do is I want to put charter schools into effect. Charter schools are nationally 17% cheaper than public schools. In Yonkers, $15,650 will establish a charter school with all of the parameters that we have right now. That's a savings of over $4,000 a student. But why don't we have that? Why do we only have one charter school in Yonkers?
We do have one, and it is growing down on Warburton Avenue.
That's right. But the reasons we don't have more is because it becomes a loss of power. All right, I think that the Board of Education has to be taken to task for the terrible job that they're doing, and that we need to put a school system in place that's viable. And what I'm proposing, Chuck, is to have better school system, not the same garbage that we've been going through for the past whatever. Who can remember when we didn't have a school dilemma in this city? No, my program will save at least $4,000 a year per student per year.
Mr. Spano, your take on education kind of getting the short end of the stick?
Where do I begin? It's amazing. We're spending close to $18,000 per pupil. Now, I've been in office where we've given significant increases in aid to education. And every time we were getting increases in aid to education, the local contribution was stagnant, up until maybe this year. And I'm sure my opponent would like to talk about that. But overall, aid to education has gone up during my watch by well over 50%. They can't make that same claim. But they still say we should throw more money at the issue. We should throw more money into our schools. When we're spending over $18,000 per pupil, we're spending $18,000 per pupil, we can't offer, and the people of Yonkers have to be worried that they're not going to have transportation, they're not going to have the school program, they're not going to have a sports program. Will there be a space for pre-K for their children? That's just unacceptable, and that's unacceptable, and it has been the norm of this administration for the 16 years, but definitely for the past 6. And during my time, when I'm mayor, I will make sure that we end the budgetary yearly crisis. The crisis, the drama that our taxpayers have to go through, because taxpayers are most important. They do pay the bills. We have to make sure that we end the crisis and the drama for them. And at the same time, you know what? Let's move the city forward, but let's stop the drama.
Quick question, quick answers, please. Should there be an elected school board in the city of Yonkers instead of a school board appointed by the mayor? Mr. Flower.
No. With a charter school system, it does almost the same thing, because it in effect achieves individual academies, so to speak, neighborhood-type schools that are designed for certain cultures, for certain type of education, and for certain communities.
Mr. Lesnick, elected school board?
I think the mayor of the city needs to take responsibility for the system like Mike Bloomberg does in New York City. Right now, he appoints people without the advice and consent of council. I would put advice and consent of council as a restriction to his appointment, and I would use a blue ribbon panel, so I wasn't appointing political people. But I think we have a hardworking school board. And the other interesting question is whether they should have an independent school district or not. I'll wait until you ask that question.
When they could impose their own taxes. Mr. Spano, what do you think about an elected school board?
It's something I consider, but I have to tell you, if you look at the budget, we have to go and redesign education in Yonkers entirely. And that's why one of the first things I will do as mayor is put in place an education redesign team, much like we did under Governor Cuomo, where we will have all the stakeholders, someone from the PTAs, someone from the union, someone from the elected body, and obviously someone from the school officials, so that we can decide how are we spending these dollars? Are we spending them correctly? And are we getting the most for our buck? Once we decide on that, we can then look elsewhere. But you know what? You just have to look at the drama each and every year and know that there's a problem.
So then quickly, I got to take a break. Should it be an independent school district with taxing authority as opposed to a dependent school district counting on the city for its budget? Mr. Spano.
It's a constitutional issue. It cannot be an independent school district with its own taxing authority. That is for certain, unless we change state constitution to big city school district.
And that takes a lot of time.
And that takes a lot of time. There's a lot of other things we can do to improve education in Yonkers, and even allow for a vote to take place on our budget. But to go that whole route we're going to lose a generation.
Mr. Lesnick?
I agree with the Assemblyman.
Okay. How about you?
If that's the law and that's the structure, I still say that a charter school structure will achieve all of the ends that are the best for the city and the students.
All right, guys, we've got to take another quick break. We're going to come back with more of this special hour-long edition of News 12's Newsmakers, the race for Yonkers mayor. Welcome back to the second half hour of this special Primary Vote 2011 edition of Newsmakers. I'm Brian Coneybear. Our guests right now are the three candidates in the Democratic Party primary for mayor in Yonkers, where the incumbent, Republican Phil Amicone, is being forced out of office by the city's term limits law. The candidates, once again for you, if you're just joining us, Robert Flower, a financial consultant and real estate investor from Yonkers. He's also a longtime community activist who helped get the city's term limits laws passed. Chuck Lesnick, Mr. Lesnick is currently serving his second term as the Yonkers City Council president. He's also an attorney in private practice. And State Assemblyman Mike Spano. Mr. Spano has the support of the Yonkers Democratic Party in this primary race. Gentlemen, we've been talking a lot about dollars and cents when it comes to education, when it comes to the city. There's another big issue that some people are worried about, and that is crime. We have had what some have termed a gang war over the summer in the city of Yonkers. 65 gang members were arrested in a joint Yonkers Police FBI raid. And there are people who are dying on the streets of Yonkers, drug dealing, shootings, and stabbings. Mr. Flower, what can be done to stop that kind of thing?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing right now, Brian, instead of just talking about it. I put together a program with 11 different churches in Yonkers, and we call it the Genesis Project. And it's a job, investment, and business program whereby the churches are the focal point of the community. And what we intend to do there is bring education in the area of crime, of entrepreneurship, of getting jobs and talents. We think that by virtue of this program, what can happen is we're going to bring the crime rate down. We're going to get the community more interested in their self-development, in achievement, in reaching their potential, and understanding that there is hope. A lot of people on the west side have lost hope. I intend to bring a working model to the community to help them to fight this, and I think there are definite programs that we can put in place to assist in crime fighting throughout that community.
Mr. Spano, your take on crime, gangs, drugs?
I think when you ask those three questions, they basically need three solid answers because they're three huge issues facing the residents of our city right now. Right now, if you look at Yonkers, like I said before, the manpower is down below what it was pre 9/11. If you had a burglary, and we know that there are many people in Yonkers who have experienced that. If we've had a burglary, the police officer comes out, they take a report, that's nice, but there's no burglary unit. The council cut it out. There's no domestic violence unit. Why? They cut it out. There are no longer the resource police officers in our schools. And those officers are very effective at being in the community. They're the ears in the community, and they can hear what's going on and try and deal with issues before they become big issues. To talk a little bit, and so we're going to have to attack the overtime budget. We're going to have to, through good, solid management. You know, if you have a police officer who's a senior officer who's making time and a half, obviously that's a lot more money than it would cost to have a rookie who's making straight time. We can have more police officers if we use our budget correctly. We also need to look at the department, see where we can redeploy. There are a number of positions in the police department which are clearly clerical positions. One is a budget officer that are held by police officers. We need to pluck the police officers from the clerical positions, put them on the ground in the hot spots in our city, deal with crime because that's the best way to deal with crime, and of course take those positions and put someone in the position who can do that type of thing. But it shouldn't be police officers. They should be fighting crime.
Mr. Lesnick, what's your take on crime, drugs, and gangs?
First of all, I want to give praise to the Yonkers Police and the federal law enforcement for the drug bust. But I was walking the streets of Yonkers the other day, and I ran into a woman who was really scared about her daughter because her daughter's boyfriend had been arrested just for a short period of time and then came out. And right after this bust happened, all of a sudden he left town and the mother left town, and her daughter started getting death threats from people who thought that her daughter might have been dating a snitch. And people shouldn't have to go to sleep with 3 bolts on their door, afraid that they're going to be whacked by some rival gang. So we really have to get at the root causes of this gang. You know, while we were talking at the Nepean Community Center the other night, I'm sorry, at the Y the other night for our debate, at the Nepean Community Center they had a basketball game and there was a shooting at it. And you know, again, Jim Bostic has his peacekeepers, men from the community wearing orange shirts trying to keep the place safe. And it was safe. Nobody was hurt. Just somebody got excited and shot a gun in the air. But that shouldn't happen. We have to get guns off the streets. But just as importantly, we have to give hope to these young men and women that they have jobs. We have to train them with education. And we can't, look what the county executive did, cutting summer job programs this year, and the federal government cutting summer job programs. We can't keep cutting summer job programs and expect these restless youth to be content. So we have to give hope. Yes, we have to put boots on the street. The council has consistently voted to put more new rookies on the street, and not only, you know, you're talking about safety, not only for crime, but for firefighters too. And when the mayor didn't want to go forward with the SAFER grant from the federal government that would have given us, and did give us 16 jobs, firefighters for 2 or 3 years. Nita Lowy was instrumental in that. I put that forward, and eventually the mayor and Nita Lowy worked out an arrangement so we could use those funds. But we absolutely have to keep the city safe.
Jobs does seem to be a huge issue as well. The economic crisis, unemployment is too high, although here it's not quite as bad as some other places. What would you do to foster more jobs? Mr. Spano, let's start with you this time.
You know what? You look at how much money we've invested in the Yonkers waterfront. Probably over $100 million that we've invested, and continue, and the waterfront continues to kind of drag and not get where it should be. We moved the Board of Education down to the waterfront. We've invested in dollars that allow for cleanup of brownfields so we could put housing there. We have actually created grant incentives that bring companies into Southwest Yonkers. Yet there was one particular company that just recently moved to Southwest Yonkers that was 2 of their employees used the Yonkers train station, and what happened? Well, they felt that they were almost robbed. Well, what happens with this is this. There are 3 fundamental issues that we need to continue to work on if we want to bring businesses into Yonkers. Fiscal stability, making sure our budget is stable. If we got $10 to spend in our pocket, that's what we should be spending $10. Making sure that we have enough police officers in the street so that there is that feeling of being safe in a community. That's the type of things, obviously having good schools would be the 3rd most important component, because when a company comes to Yonkers, they want their families to live in Yonkers. They're not going to live here if they can't use the schools. So I think that's what Yonkers has been missing for a long time. And that's why a city that has location, hasn't quite made it work. If you look north of Yonkers, very successful communities all on the waterfront. South Yonkers, very successful communities all on the waterfront. These are the issues that we need to focus on. I will focus on them because there's a leadership void in City Hall. I will make sure that that doesn't exist.
Mr. Lesnick, development the way to create more jobs?
It is, but we also have to make sure they're good paying jobs and they're Yonkers jobs. You know, in June I spent a lot of time in downtown Yonkers by the train station with my volunteers trying to get signatures on my petitions. And the guys would come by with their hard hats and lunch pails and tell me they don't live in Yonkers. Sorry, they can't sign the petition. So I know that we could do a better job to hire our local residents. We have to put some of these local guys, you know, we put money into the Nepean Community Center for job training, and then we don't use the guys that we train for the jobs. Thirdly, have to be living wage jobs. The council has twice passed a bill that says if we spend $100,000 in subsidy for a big development like Ridge Hill or SFC, then the lowest paid workers have to earn a rate that if they work 40 hours a week, they can pull themselves out of poverty. That in Westchester County is $27,500 a year, or $10.85 plus $1.50 for health benefits. And you know what? That's fine. Costco does it. They pay $17 an hour. They have the best sales per square foot of any big box store. Who cares if Walmart doesn't come to Yonkers because they want to pay lower wages? If we're going to invest in these companies, and again, there are exceptions for youth training and mom and pop stores, then they have to pay their lowest paid workers. The mayor has twice vetoed that, and when I'm mayor, I'm going to sign that into law.
Mr. Flower, jobs.
Yeah, more legislative type thinking. That's, again, we're back to the same old problem. I mean, we bring these companies in, we bring these developers in, and then we give them tax exemptions and incentives that are greater than what they're spending. I mean, the waterfront, Ridge Hill, I mean, it's a joke. $15 to $18 million, that's a property that was worth $150 to $180 million. I mean, it's ridiculous. What we need is an executive, experienced leadership that knows what they're doing, put a plan in place. What we should have done with those developments, instead of giving it to one developer, we should have brought in an outside planner to work with the community, to work with our planning department, cast a specific plan, broken up into areas, and then sold off those individual areas to individual developers, mid-sized developers. This way we're not stuck with one guy who, when he goes out of business, or he then turns around and holds up the city for more money or bigger tax incentives. No, that's not the way to run a city. That's not the way to generate more revenue, and certainly not the way to generate jobs.
Quickly, the SFC development downtown. I want to get all of your takes on that. Will it ever happen? A, that includes the ballpark, the apartments, the stores, the retail, the new firehouse, the hotel, all that. Will that happen? Do you support it? And should we use eminent domain to help make it happen?
And I have, if it does happen, it's not going to happen for another 5 or 6 years. The way this economy is going, I could tell you as an economist, I mean, I taught real estate economics at West Point. This is not going to happen. It's not going to happen within the next 4 or 5 years. And it won't happen then if these companies don't stay in business. Again, we need to have specific programs that will work instead of relying on one deal and then everything falls apart. And we're sitting here with our thumb in our ear.
Eminent domain, yes or no?
No. There are ways of working that it's not necessary.
Mr. Lesnick, is SFC going to happen? Should we use eminent domain?
SFC will definitely happen, whether they bring in different partners to supplement partners who have left. They spend an awful lot of time and money going through the approval process, and they have something that's very valuable. And compared to my predecessor, Rich Martinelli, who rammed through the Ridge Hill process and then was subject to lawsuits, with SFC we had twice as many public hearings in half as much time, and we got community input, and we came up with a project that people could be happy with, and that is going to be built incrementally. And I think the first part, the renovation of the library, the old library building, which will both serve as a mini anchor in downtown and a place to relocate it, will happen real soon. Because of the council involvement, we got more revenue from SFC than we did from Ridge Hill, and that project will happen.
Eminent domain, yes or no?
There are times when eminent domain is necessary, certainly for health and emergency issues, but also in some cases, you look at, for instance, the Greyston Workforce Housing Project, which is being built, and there's an old gas station on the corner that's for sale. They just can't come up with a price. Now, if you have eminent domain, it actually helps the owner because he doesn't have to pay capital gains tax on it. So that's an area where you can all agree that it's a good project.
Mr. Spano, SFC and eminent domain for you?
Eminent domain obviously is a last resort. We should always try and negotiate, especially with property owners, because they are, in fact, the property owner. We're going to have a unique opportunity to relook at this project. I support the project, its concept, and I think that that's what every mayoral candidate should say. But the fact of the matter is, the council dragged their feet for quite a long time on that project. There was an opportunity to invest a lot of money in our city. They lost that opportunity. It was the same nonsense that went on in Ridge Hill that has dragged us into this downturn in the economy. It's not their fault that the economy dragged down, but it is their fault that they dragged the projects along. And there was ample time, in my opinion, to address the needs of the community and to do so in a more expedient way. They didn't. They failed us, and that's something that we need to hold them accountable for.
All right, guys, we're going to be back with a final round of questions here on News 12 after one more quick break. Don't go away. You are watching a special primary vote 2011 edition of News 12's Newsmakers. This is the final segment with the Democratic candidates for mayor of Yonkers right now. Gentlemen, we are quickly running out of time, but I wanted to ask you about something we've all heard, and nobody is particularly proud of it. The city of Hills, where nothing's on the level. We have a former city councilwoman who's going to go on trial for bribery and extortion, Sandy Anabi. We have had investigations of the fire department. There have been DPW workers arrested for stealing things. What can we do to eradicate that perception that Yonkers politics is rife with corruption? Mr. Flower.
Yeah, you do away with career politicians. That's the first step, and do away with the political machine and the old boy network. This is what's killing the city, like I've been saying right along. What we need to do is be able to make objective decisions, business-like decisions, without politics coming into place. I mean, you take anything, you know, the debt issue or what have you, on a federal, state, or city level. Once you take the politics, that career political mindset out of the equation, you have an answer, and it's like that. And that's what I propose, that's what I bring to the table.
Is Yonkers corrupt, in your opinion?
Oh, absolutely. I was born and raised here. My father was born and raised here, and you're not going to tell me that that there isn't a lot of corruption. I'm not going to say everybody, but there certainly is more in our city than in most.
Mr. Spano, your take on the city of Hills?
You know what, Bob? I'm not going to take that tack that that our entire city is corrupt. I'm proud of the city my grandfather came to, and it's a city I love, and a city that I'm going to make better. You know why? Because I hold myself to the highest standards. To the highest standards is how I conduct business, is how I operate, and how I run my entire time in public service. And that's what you do as a leader. As a leader, you set the standard, and that's what I will do as mayor. I will set the standard, and you know what? And the working men and women who work in our city on a day-to-day basis will meet those standards as well. And if they don't, they will not be there.
Thank you, Mr. Spano. Mr. Lesnick, your take on corruption. Is Yonkers a corrupt place?
Yeah, it's a terrible brush to paint the workforce with. I mean, 95% of the people are doing the right thing, but we have to have zero tolerance to those who do the wrong thing. And it's not just the blatant examples of corruption that you mentioned, but it's this sort of friends and family club, the nepotism that constantly goes on. The fact that people get hired and promoted at City Hall, not based on what they know, but who they know or who they're with. And that's demoralizing to people who have educational backgrounds and qualifications, and then they get passed over. It's also a reason why some developers don't want to come to Yonkers to compete, because they think that it's an inside job and they won't be able to compete. Once you send out a clear signal that we have changed the mindset at City Hall, that we are open, we are transparent, and we do not tolerate corruption, I think the best and the brightest will come forward.
You know, excuse me, it's not the workers that are corrupt. It's the leadership that's corrupt. That's where it's coming from. It's coming from those who are in control, not necessarily the workers.
Gentlemen, I'm going to give you each 1 minute here. We have 1 minute each for a closing statement. We are quickly running out of time. We drew lots earlier. Mr. Spano, you get the
I'll be quick. You know, one issue that we didn't touch on was the fact that was property taxes. I know that my opponent has bragged about the fact he's kept property taxes on average at 5% increases a year, which is double the rate of what people earn and double the rate of inflation. I worked with Governor Cuomo to create a property tax cap, and also sponsored the STAR property tax cap one as a legislator in Albany. 2 ways to help reduce the property tax burden in the city of Yonkers. I'll simply put to the viewers, if you like the way Yonkers has been running and you want to continue in that direction, then obviously you want to vote for my opponent. But if you want to end the crisis and end the year-to-year budgetary issues that have plagued our city and the drama that has plagued our city, then I ask you to come take a ride with me, because Yonkers is a beautiful city with a great future, and together we can make it the best city in all of New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spano. Mr. Lesnick, you have a minute, sir.
You know, what he doesn't take into account is that the mayor proposes the budget each year and the council passes a budget. And over the last 6 years, the budget that we've passed has been a point or so less than what the mayor has proposed. So we have decrease the property tax increase, which of course is convoluted because we haven't done reval since 1954, and property values throughout the city get reduced every year by $10 to $12 million through tax certiorari. We have to clean up that system. Now, the tax cap that my opponent passed is going to really hurt the city of Yonkers. Now, there's no question that taxpayers need relief. But without mandate reform, which Albany was supposed to do simultaneous with the tax cap, we're not going to get it. They think that by doing the tax cap first, the mandate reform will follow. Let's see what happens. We've put that challenge out there. But I believe, unlike what was said earlier, that Yonkers' best days are not behind us. I mean, my family hasn't been here for 100 years to know what might have happened in the 1800s. But I believe that the 21st century, we're going to have our greatest time as a city.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Flower, you get the last word, 1 minute.
Yeah, you know, with all of the candidates, Democrat and Republicans, and all of their background and experience in politics all these years, the question I have is, with all of that experience and knowledge and involvement, why are we in the mess that we're in? And further, with all that experience and knowledge, where are the answers? What programs, and I haven't heard any, and I haven't seen any from any candidate, Democrat or Republican. I bring that to the table. Bob Flower from Mayor.com, you will see specific, detailed answers to serious questions, the schools, the budget, the crime, and jobs. I ask you for your support, September 13th for mayor. Let's turn this city around.
Thank you, Mr. Flower. Thank you to all the candidates. Gentlemen, thank you for sharing your views on the future of the city of Yonkers. Best of luck to all of you on